Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I've talked about classic creators and everything else. And one of the things that you hear from the industry is that old art styles don't sell. And typically, where this is coming from is an editor who's making a choice for a book, and it's basically the logic of today's new readers, the readers that we're chasing, the ones we want on the books. They don't care for classic styles. Now, where they get this data from is a little bit, mysterious because the company also pumps out, plenty of graphic novels and omnibuses and other things with exactly those styles. The company, hails legends like Jack Kirby, while simultaneously saying that new readers can't, understand, digest, or want old styles. So, I mean, there's a bunch of somewhat confusing, um, you know, comments on this topic. It doesn't all light up. But nonetheless, this is what's said. And my theory in all this is the reason why they're saying old art styles don't sell has nothing to do with an understanding of the marketplace, of the customers, the people who are buying the books, and has everything to do with the fact that what they would really prefer to do is just hire their buddy, the person that they're friends with on Instagram, or or more likely somebody who is cheap. It's let's we say we don't want to pay Walt Simonson's rate, so we'll go out, we'll grab an artist from Brazil, and we'll try that one for a while. I think that there's a lot to that, and I think another factor, and I've heard this from editors as well, directly, is that some of these classic creators are a pain in the ass to work with. They have demands like they want the script on time. It's like, and some are legitimately jerks. I mean, I don't know. It's funny. One of the I don't have a lot of enemies, if you will, of people I truly dislike. There's like at a deep core level. There's a few. In doing this channel, that list has grown. I'll be honest, but it's not a big list. It's not like dozens and dozens of people. It's really one of those like count on one hand. Maybe we're into the second hand at this point. But one of them is an artist who I can't stand this guy. Absolutely can't stand the guy. I'll say on the offset, it's my business, so I'm not going to air that dirty laundry. It is not who you think. You have some names in your head right now. I'm sure. I guarantee you, it is not who you think. But this was an artist who, repeatedly, paintings, who, didn't show up when they were supposed to. I mean, a bunch of very unprofessional behavior. When did show up was a prick about it. I mean, there are a bunch of different moments where this guy was a big pain to deal with, and arrogant, and everything else. And it's just again, somebody who no shows puts him on my bad list very rapidly. I mean, just full stop. So anyway, half of you probably have never heard of the guy. The other half definitely have, but would be shocked. You would not expect it. You wouldn't expect the name coming out. Anyway, all that said, the classic art styles do sell. I think that's there's plenty of evidence from the big two that they know this as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep trying to cash in on classic artists. So there's some hypocrisy here, and there's a little bit of talking out of both sides of the mouth. But here is a mail from somebody who's got kind of a similar point of view. So let's read this. It says, "Hey Perch, lately I've been thinking about that Walt Simonson thing. This idea that editors of Marvel and DC have somehow gotten the idea in their heads that old art styles don't sell. That it's just some nostalgia thing that can only work for something playing on nostalgia. I've been thinking about this because almost any time I see some bit of Marvel merchandise, always seems to be art from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Every time I see this merchandise, mostly Marvel, it just makes me wonder about the cognitive dissonance happening with editorial. I mean, presumably, the merchandise vastly outsells the actual comics. Clearly, the masses are cool with art styles from old comics. Looking at it the way Marvel chooses to present this side of itself on t-shirts just makes me wonder about the whole way the actual comics do things." Okay. That's a great point, by the way, in that the licensing money is, you're right, it's in many cases a lot more volume, a lot more money in many cases than the comics. And absolutely, it's the, when they go to the licensing thing, there's that Jim Lee art, there's that Walt Simonson Thor. I mean, that is what they do. They don't go and hire kind of the cheapest artists they can find. They go to the classics, and that's how they choose to put their brand forward. So again, this, you're right. It absolutely, it's just one more piece of all this that points out what a dumb point of view this is. Anyway, how about, okay, back to the mail. It says, like the way modern comics are colored, which everyone seems to hate, why not just return to classic coloring? They know people will buy it because they buy the shirts. It's like comic books, the American comic book industry, are the most ineptly run entertainment business around, where people running things have formed odd ideas based on nothing and hold on to whatever idea even when they have evidence to the contrary. Do you also find it odd that editors think this or that artist won't sell because they're old whenever you see a bunch of Marvel shirts or posters with art from Jack Kirby, Dave Cockrum, Sal Buscema? I kind of have to imagine that for most kids today, thanks to merchandise, a comic book look of Marvel's most popular characters is probably pre-2000 versions as opposed to any comic today. So it's a great point. No arguments. Now, I think that there is certainly, other styles they put out. They'll put out something with Oliver Capil. They'll put out, they will put out other books or other artists for sure. It's not just the classic artists, but there's a healthy assortment of classic artists that they do, and it is more Marvel than DC. In some cases, merchandise is clearly trying to hook off nostalgia. That no doubt about it. It's this hey kids comics kind of perspective that they'll do. But cognitive dissonance is the word. It is this very, very strange behavior of saying, yeah, no comic reader, no new comic reader will be able to kind of understand Kirby, which is a direct quote that I've heard before, could understand Walt Simonson, could understand Buscema, could understand Steve Ditko. Nobody would get it. Nobody would understand. Hey, all the shirts we're selling feature art by those people. It's like, what? I mean, what in the world? I mean, it's bizarre. If you think about it, it is truly, truly strange. That is where, that's how the company presents itself. Look, I mean, the reality is, if the comic looks good, then an art style that is quote unquote dated is not going to matter. It really is kind of limited imagination. It always terrifies me a little bit when there's people in comics, people running comics, people in editorial who have very limited imaginations. I think that's a job where you want somebody with huge imaginations, tons. I mean, somebody who's, oftentimes you have to pull them back down to earth. You want the person who's thinking up the most crazy radical ideas, and then you're helping to shape and coordinate that. The fact that all these kind of classic artists, it's like the only way we can use them is when we're doing some kind of flashback in a comic, or we're basically doing a nostalgia play. I didn't used to be this way, but I've started to get irritated when I see comics where they'll have like a flashback sequence, and they'll basically bring in a different artist who's got more of a dated style, quote unquote dated style, to actually draw those pages. And it's always like, hey, look at the time when comics were stupid and goofy and and all the characters looked ridiculous. It's like, man, I mean, I would right now trade for a lot of these artists. It reminds me, I did get into a big argument on Twitter once with somebody who's like, anyone who tells you that the modern art is worse than the classic art is a liar. Art is subjectively and objectively better today than it was 20 years ago. And again, it is a matter of opinion. But I think you are high. If you're making that claim, you're out of your mind. There is comics that are done now where clearly there's less time, less effort, less energy put on the page. where we know the artist was paid less and has a lot less experience in comics, and you're going to compare that to a Walt Simonson or a John Byrne or a Jack Kirby. Get out of here. I'm sorry. No. There's no, you look at the detail on the page, and you put a modern piece of art down, and again, I'm speaking generically. Certainly there's some amazing current modern artists. There absolutely are. There's a world of difference between, there's a world of difference between artists. So this is not a catch-all statement that applies to everyone. But, and that was true back in the 60s and the 70s as well. There were some comics that, there were some legends in there, and there are also some very forgettable people in there. For sure. That's how it's always been. I guess, and that proves the point. I mean, that, there is, I would go to this level. I would say that the opportunity to have great art in comics is as good today as it was 40 years ago. And I would say that the great artists 40 years ago, anyone who thinks that style is dated and won't sell is defying reality and is not even paying attention to what the companies are doing themselves. If you like a lot of the current modern art, great. Again, there's a lot of modern artists I enjoy a lot. But if you think you're making an argument that this modern art style is somehow objectively and subjectively better than old art, you're out of your mind. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Fuck off. No. Anyway. Thank you very much for the mail. I think it's a great point. Definitely one worth noting. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And thanks for listening.